proceedings will take place live on the internet. The meeting will be recorded for future viewing. It will assist the conduct of business if participants speak only when invited. Members of the public are welcome to view the proceedings but should not make contributions at this meeting. All members of the committee have received the reports in advance and had the opportunity to read them. Can I just check everyone's got the report, the yellow book?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reports
Yes,
are
Chair.
published on the internet. All participants should mute their microphones and video feed when they are not speaking. I think this helps with the reception. Anyone wishing to speak should indicate using the raise your hand button on Microsoft Teams. Please remember to unmute your microphone and switch on your video feed when it is your turn to speak. Speak clearly and show into the microphone. If you do not have the hand button, please type your request to speak in the chat function. When the item on which you have contributed is concluded, you may leave the meeting by using the red hang up button if you wish. Finally, I'll ask everyone's patience with the use of technology and apologise in advance if we experience any unforeseen difficulties, which we'll try to resolve. Number 2, apologies for absence.
We've received apologies from Councillor Alan Finch.
Okay, thank you. Any substitutes?
Yes, Chair. Councillor T. Crumpton will be subbing for Councillor Alan Finch.
Great, thank you. Any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct? Sorry, gone there. Any declarations of interest under the Members' Code? None. Can we confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on 24th of September? Everyone had a copy of the minutes. Everyone happy with that?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move on to the only issue tonight, topic tonight, air quality monitoring. Some of the topics for the scrutiny are sort of officer-led, and this is one that's committee-led. And we've seen, probably seen the green boxes. There's 2, 3 in the borough. I've seen the one in Wordsley High Street, and I've always wondered what goes on with that and what happens to the data. And I'm sure Tim will be able to give us a full explanation in his report. So over to Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to apologise. My camera, I'm afraid, doesn't look like it's going to work. I've got, well, unless you can see me now, I've got a blank screen. So I do apologise for that. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. Nice to see you all tonight. So I'm Tim Glows, and I'm a public protection manager working in environmental health and trading standards, and I specifically look after environmental protection, which includes air quality. So the report today was requested by committee. I'll just briefly run through some of the parts of the report, and then please feel free to ask questions about it. So the report itself is to update committee on the current position, specifically with respect to air quality monitoring and compliance within the borough. So paragraph 2 has got 4 recommendations, and they are simply to note the current position with respect to air quality monitoring. Hopefully to support the continuation of monitoring after you've heard the report. And in some areas maybe support enhanced air quality monitoring where the air quality is still quite poor, and we'll look at that in the report. And finally, to endorse the measures that have been undertaken to improve air quality as detailed in the report. So if we just move on to background, in paragraph 3, it says that way back in 2007, the whole of Dudley Metropolitan Borough Council was declared as an air quality management area, specifically for nitrogen dioxide. No other pollutants have ever exceeded the national air quality objectives in Dudley, just nitrogen dioxide, and the predominant source of that is from road vehicles, the tailpipe exhaust emissions. The other pollutants in paragraph 4 that is routinely measured is particulate matter, or dust or soot actually usually, but certainly just particulates, and we'll look at where we monitor that later in the report. But that is always being complied with. If we just move on to paragraph 5 in the air quality monitoring provisions, we use diffusion tubes. Now they're small tubes, about half the size of a typical ballpoint pen, and they're clear plastic like most pens are. And we have them in brackets dotted around the borough at locations where we're concerned about air quality. So there are 54 of these at 45 different sites. All over the borough, including, it says there, Duncan Edwards Way, which is the most recent ones that we've put out, and they help us to monitor the air quality. But it is just an indicative measurement. It's not an very accurate measurement. So for accuracy, in paragraph 6, there are 3 automatic monitoring stations located in the borough, and Chairman referred to these. And one's behind the offices at 35 St James's Road on the car park. One's in Collegate, in fact, it's on the footpath just outside Wilson Hall in Cradley there, and the other one's in Worsley High Street, opposite the entrance to the church. And the analyzers within these boxes are very accurate and give us readings of various pollutants. And in that paragraph 6, it just elaborates on the types of pollutants. The NO2 is the nitrogen dioxide, and PM10 and PM2.5 are particulate matter, the dust monitors, and some have got just PM10 and some go down to very fine particulates, the PM2.5s, which are harmful to health. I've tried to show this in a graph just below that paragraph, and the graph just shows the 3 monitoring stations and the results over a fair few years now. In fact, Central Dudley back to the year 2000, so we've been monitoring for a long time, and you can see that the general trend is down for all 3 of them, with a few blips. And we'll look at that in the next graph, and I'll explain the blips because it's a bit more apparent in the next graph. But I'm glad to say the good news is that air quality has improved significantly over the years, and the monitoring stations demonstrate that. If we move on to paragraph 7, bring us up to date, and we're always with the most of the data. We can get data quite quickly, but to analyse the data properly, we're always a year behind. We need 12 months data to really analyse it properly. So if we refer to year 2019, we'll know 2020's data at the end of February time. Generally, we'll have that all sorted for them. Jumping back to 2018, in fact, there were 9 areas that identified in the borough which showed an exceedance of the national objectives. And by 2019, that had fallen to 6. And these 6 areas are listed in the table below there. And I'll read through them quickly. The Halzone Road in Netherton, High Street Worsley, High Street Quarry Bank, Birmingham Road in Dudley, Windmill Hill, Cradley, and Hall Street, Dudley. So those are 6 locations we monitor at. And you can see the numbers in the right-hand column. The national objective level for nitrogen dioxide, this is 40, and 3 of them are quite close to 40. And we fully expect those 3 to be compliant by the end of 2020 when we get the data analysed. The other 3, High Street Quarry Bank, High Street Worsley, and Halzone Road Netherton, are significantly higher. High Street Worsley, we've undertaken a lot of work in High Street Worsley recently, and the standing traffic has been improved significantly on the 1 carriageway coming up the hill. And we're hoping at the end of 2020, the end of this year, that we will be there or thereabouts at the national objective level. So we expect Halzone Road Netherton and High Street Quarry Bank will be the 2 areas of exceedance that are left that we need to concentrate and focus our efforts on in future. Just to elaborate a little more, the graph below for nitrogen dioxide, we've split it into 2 on that graph, so that the pink line is the average of all roadside sites, and the green traces the average of the background sites, so away from the roadsides, and it really demonstrates the difference between the pollutant levels for nitrogen dioxide in particular near to the roadside. So maybe on lampposts, the tubes will be on lampposts, or perhaps drain pipes on buildings close to the back of footpath. And you can see those bumps that I talked about. So it's a downward trend generally, but not particularly significant downward for the last few years, and the rises there are generally down to climate. Air quality is governed by climate, so some years we have good years and other years we have bad years. So although the air quality is coming down generally and improving generally, the climate has a massive effect. But you can see that the background has come down a lot more than the roadside. So again, it points to road traffic being the main pollutant for nitrogen dioxide. Okay, if we just move on to actions to improve air quality, because monitoring it is one thing, but doing something about it's something different completely. And the way that we do this, or the modes that we use, are we work very closely with development management, our planners. So we try to ensure that the appropriate air quality improvements are required by condition on planning applications when they come in. So we get consulted on lots of planning applications, and we've got a few standard conditions now about electric vehicle charging points and low NOx boilers that have got cleaner emissions. We're also in paragraph 9 use grant aid to help fund air quality improvements. In fact, that's where most of the air quality improvements have been funded from recently, and they include a few examples there. We got a grant to upgrade 10 coaches operated by Prospect Coaches of Law, and these coaches are the ones that ferry the students to college and kids to swimming pool, so they're dodging about all over the borough all day long. And they weren't particularly good coaches, so we upgraded those to a much better specification and got about a 95% reduction in nitrogen dioxide from the coaches when we measured them after. We upgraded 2 cycle and pedestrian crossings in Cradley across the A458 down there. Some education work as well, so anti-idling project work in schools and colleges, and material for teachers to present as well. That was funded through grant aid. And finally, the most recent is some work up in Dudley on Duncan Edwards Way, specifically and all the way down from Burntree all the way to Cinderbank Island, making improvements there, and also Worsley High Street as well as an awful lot of money retrofitting buses. So all the buses that use the routes, those 2 routes specifically, High Street Worsley, are now improved. Their emissions are much better. In fact, the one bus company didn't improve the buses. They took the money and put it towards buying a new fleet. So there's lots of new buses dodging around Worsley now, and again we anticipate the improvement to be hopefully quite significant when we get the data for 2020 because of that work. So that work is, as paragraph 10 explains, we work hand in hand with the highways engineers employed by Dudley Council. Because most of the changes are highway improvements, and that includes things like cycle and walking routes and electric vehicle network of charging points to be improved, down to things just as simple as improving the information at passenger transport hubs, certainly the Merry Hill hub there, and we of course are involved in the Midland Metro Extension project because that again will help to improve air quality, we hope. So a quick summary is we monitor throughout the borough to demonstrate air quality is improving, and it is, thankfully. And we had a press release on the back of this this committee report earlier this week to state that quite categorically. But there are areas that need further improvement. We know that. The data collected and process is used to inform our colleagues in development management transport services, not just in Dudley but wider as well across the West Midlands and certainly in the Black Country. We consult our colleagues about air quality improvements on a wider basis, and continued and where necessary enhanced air quality monitoring to help focus our attention and finance through grant aid on the areas that really need it, which again is really Quarrybank High Street and Halesome Road in Netherton going forward from this year. And quickly to work through the standard paragraphs, the finance, we've got 1 full-time equivalent air quality officer and a couple of other officers, myself and another one who help manage it. We've got an annual budget, quite a small annual budget really, of £14,600, and that pays for the maintenance, repair and purchasing and analysing the tubes, all the things we need to do to continue to get the data. And all the other improvements we make are through grant aid, generally from central government, though public health within Dudley Council has provided some grant aid from reserve for some projects, which has been very useful. The law says, it states it's a statutory duty to undertake air quality monitoring and to declare an air quality management area where there's an issue, which we've done all of that, and then publish an air quality action plan, which we did back in 2011 to address the air quality problems we've got. So we're legally we're okay. The equality impact is useful for air quality because it obviously benefits all residents of the borough and visitors to the borough if we improve air quality. But there is definitely a correlation between poor air quality and areas with highest traffic pollutants with the more deprived areas in the borough. So every time we take action to improve air quality, we are specifically improving the area around the more deprived areas generally in the borough, which are the more built up urban areas that we've got in Dudley Borough. There are no HR organisation development implications, and commercial procurement is really down to a few contracts we've got for provision and maintenance of equipment. And finally, the health and wellbeing and safety paragraph number 22. It is recognised as a contributing factor in the onset of lots of diseases, and there are a few listed there. Some surprising ones, from heart disease and cancer to learning in children. Certainly, the most vulnerable in society are affected worst by poor air quality. So the continued and maybe enhanced monitoring in some locations and reporting, and then action on that data, hopefully will have a positive impact on health, wellbeing and safety of the borough's residents. And that's the report, Chairman. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Tim, and a good insight into that issue, topic of air quality monitoring, and good to see also the annual trends on the graphs going down, which is encouraging. Any questions or comments from any of the committee? Anything at all from anyone? Okay, Councillor Sahota.
I just want to sort of echo your sort of comments for the report. I think it's a detailed report in terms of the progress we've made going forward in terms of improving the air quality. I just want to sort of ask just a couple of general questions to Tim. Obviously, in terms of the air quality, Tim, how does the air quality in Dudley compare to the other similar kind of boroughs? Are we on par in terms of the league tables, or are we towards the top, or are we mid-table? Are we on track?
We are on track. We compare very favourably with other boroughs, and the Black Country, the 4 Black Country boroughs are very similar indeed. We've all got areas where compliance is difficult. I suppose the most favourable comparison is with Birmingham and also Coventry, and Birmingham with their clean air zone, and Coventry almost a clean air zone. They haven't in the end. They're making some very significant highways improvements to avoid a clean air zone, but Birmingham obviously will have a significant clean air zone because their air quality basically is really quite poor in the central areas. We haven't got that in Dudley. We have obviously the 5 centres, which we've focused our efforts on, but we haven't got one particularly large central area like Birmingham City Centre to worry about. So generally, I think we're in a good position in Dudley compared to our neighbours.
Just another question. I don't know whether this question is probably for yourself or probably maybe Gary Dean. Obviously, you touched on the fact that obviously this does have an impact on investment in highway improvements across the various wards in the borough, and obviously areas where it's deprived or where there's health and safety, where there's sort of high heart disease and cancer, obviously have an impact in focusing on those areas. Is there evidence then in terms of the investment when we decide to look at road schemes for improving sort of air pollution, that actually the funding does go to those areas where it's needed in the deprived wards, etc., and that can be shown as that is a key factor when we're looking at the criteria for road schemes to improve sort of traffic flows. So that is that a key in terms of the criteria? Where does that then sit in the various criteria highways look at when they look at where to do the improvements in the borough?
Okay, through you, Chair. Yeah, certainly when the highways engineers look at the improvements they want to make, they consult us to find if that location has got good or bad air quality. So it is a factor that's used to decide on the highways improvements and priority. So the most recent one that we've had a big input into is the improvement works in Pensnet. So Pensnet High Street was pretty poor as far as air quality was concerned. Certainly exceeded and has been on the list of exceedances for many years. Slowly getting better, but not very quickly. And the improvements that were made to Pensnet High Street have meant that there's not an air quality problem along that area now. So we're certainly consulted by our highways colleagues, and it's definitely a factor that's taken into account the air quality, good, bad or indifferent air quality, to determine whether the highways projects go ahead. Generally where highways projects go ahead is because of congestion. And if there's congestion, that normally means there's poor air quality, so they go hand in hand anyway. So yeah, we certainly consulted.
Can't hear you. Sorry, we can't hear you, Councillor.
Sorry, final question, Tim. Obviously, Hellside Road in Netherton is still sort of, it's in the very high in terms of where we need to be. Do we know exactly what's causing that sort of big figure, and what are plans to sort of address that? Are there other external factors? Is it a lot of industrial estates, other areas that could be contributing to that big total?
That's a really good question, Councillor. Through you, Chair. It's a difficult one, Hellside Road, Netherton, because really it shouldn't be as bad as it seems. The data makes it worse than it really is. We've just completed a report specifically on Hellside Road in Netherton for a senior management to consider. And I had a meeting with Matt Williams earlier this week, and Neil Lissimore and Gary Dean as well, to just go through the implications of it. And what we recognise now is that where we're monitoring from makes a big difference in Hellside Road, Netherton in particular. It really is the absolute worst case scenario where we're monitoring the pollutants from. So we're monitoring very, very close to the highway. And we realise that there's not really anyone who's a relevant receptor at that location. There's no one living in the locations. So we're looking carefully at where we monitor and see if we can put some more reasonable locations in to do comparisons with. Carry on monitoring where we're monitoring from, but do additional monitoring as well where people are actually being exposed to air quality, which is the important thing. Which we think will show that it's not as bad as it actually seems to be. But also we've implemented quite a lot of highway schemes in Hellside Road, Netherton, and we're looking at some others to do down there, and we're working closely with the 3 ward members for that location, just to see what further improvements we can make to traffic flow around there, and that also includes upgrading the bus fleet that use Hellside Road. But it is a difficult one, and the factors that make the air quality poor in Netherton and Quarrybank High Street for that matter are all the same. It's the gradient, so there's a hill through there. It's heavily trafficked. There's lots of stop-start traffic with pedestrian crossings and traffic lights. Maybe parking issues as well that obstruct traffic. Difficult right turns. So we're looking at all these different issues and just try and put things in place so we can just ease the traffic flow through these locations, which makes a surprising difference. If you can just keep the traffic flowing, even when it's busy, and obviously those locations are very busy, it can make a really big impact. So there's a few angles really with Hellside Road, Netherton, that we're looking at in the next 12 to 18, 24 months to try to get better data, more accurate data for what we've got there, and two, to make some more improvements down there on the highway to again keep the traffic flowing better. And yes, there there is a disproportionate number of heavy goods vehicles in our zone road in Netherton as well, using Netherton for the industrial estates that you pointed out in that location. So compared to other locations in Dudley, there is a higher proportion of HGVs as well, which again don't help the situation. But you know, that's commerce. We have to encourage that, so we accept that. We just have to make their passage through Netherton a little easier if we can to improve the situation.
Can't hear you, Councillor.
Sorry, I just want to thank you for your detailed answer and also the hard work you're doing on this project. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crumpton.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to be too parochial here, because I remember when the air monitoring stuff went in Cradley, and we had a regular Cradley forum, and traffic in the Cradley area has been a perennial problem, mainly because it's the main road between Stourbridge straight through to Birmingham, and is actually a bottleneck. When you look along the rest of that route between Stourbridge and Birmingham, the other area that was a major problem for us was Lye, and of course we had a huge project that was undertaken in Lye with the bypass around the back. The problem we still have in Lye, of course, is that the traffic build-up within the high street, which is very much the sort of thing you were talking about then, Tim, you know, a lot of traffic, a lot of parking problems, a lot of pedestrian problems, but at least it was alleviated to some extent. And because of the bypass, the traffic then coming down the Thorns towards the Hagley area has also been freed up quite a lot. But we've known about these problems for a good many years, and often when it's come to talking with the public about this, what they look at is the number 9 bus, and say it appears that the traffic generated behind the number 9 bus is not bothered about. It's just the fact that we need the number 9 bus to be going through every 10 minutes or so, whatever it is. But when you look at the other areas which you've got within this report, so I'm just trying to get it back up again, within the report, you've talked about Household and Netherton, High Street Wordsley, I think, is that the bit that goes up the road towards the Cat, I'm presuming?
That's right.
Yeah. Then you've got the High Street Quarry Bank, I can't talk to Birmingham Road, Dudley, but in Windmill Hill, Cradley, each one of, well, at least 3 of those have got a bank that people are going up and down. But the problem I've got with this is that the nitrogen dioxide levels and others, we can tinker at the edges of them. You know, the fact that we get that 40 is like a target for us doesn't mean that that's healthy for us. But the reality of the situation is that we're spending an awful lot of money at the moment on other forms of transport, when actually to make people's lives better, we need to do something about these bottlenecks. Because if you look at Quarry Bank, for instance, we're just spending an awful lot of money up there on the bus station and its attachment to the train, quite rightly, but all that's going to do really is make it much more difficult from 5 o'clock onwards through till 6 o'clock, and in the mornings as well, in the Quarry Bank area, if we get more people using the buses and more people using the trains. So that's a problem for us. With Cradley, we did have a bypass project in a few years ago, which, because it didn't go through, blighted the houses and people's lives for quite a long time. So we don't want that again. But at some stage, we've got to stop messing about, haven't we, really? And decide that we do need to look at some quite heavy investments in our roads and in the traffic, you know, how we bypass areas like this. Because you mentioned where the air quality monitoring station is in Netherton, just presumably right by the side of the traffic on the pavement with not a lot of space behind it. In Cradley, it's a little bit opposite that, because we've got it by the Labour Club with a huge area in comparison with the rest of the Cradley area, huge area around it where these things can disperse. So we're probably not finding the most polluted part of Cradley, which may very well be a few yards up the road from there, where the road narrows so much and when the houses are right on the pavement, and it doesn't allow things to disperse. So although I sort of congratulate us on trying to reduce these things, it really has to be in the end, doesn't it, about much greater investment in taking these roads away from these quite large centres of population. And just to finish, we've just had this new set of houses built right on the highway opposite the Labour Club. And I'm uncertain because I haven't seen the planning side of this at all. But anecdotal discussion around it in the area was that they were told they couldn't open their front windows because of the pollution that was going to be there. And I think that's really worrying, isn't it? That we're also allowing buildings to be built in areas like that where we know the potential health problems that they're going to cause are there. So I come back to we really do need to look at more things like the Lye bypass and the Pensnet, the changes that we made in Pensnet. I know they cost a lot of money, but actually, if we don't do that, we're just going to live with these things for the rest of, well, people's very much shortened lives.
Yeah, Chair, can I respond to that, please? Is it
Sure.
through you? Is that okay? Thank you, Councillor. I don't disagree with anything you said there. Obviously, it really is an issue with congestion, and you're absolutely right that the example I gave of Pensnet, other examples, you mentioned Lye High Street and Briley Hill High Street as well. Briley Hill High Street was actually the first area we declared before the whole borough was declared for nitrogen dioxide, and both of those locations had significant highway schemes costing multi-million pounds to resolve the traffic and congestion problems, and that has also then had a positive effect on air quality. And yes, air quality is much better in Briley Hill High Street and Lye High Street. The air quality where we monitor from at least complies with this 40, which isn't a magic number. I agree with that as well. It's just a national objective. That the whole consensus that we try and make the air as clean as possible. We don't stop at 40. We carry on making the air quality better, because that level almost certainly will be reduced in the near future to a lower level, to have another target to aim towards. And the ways to do that are obviously many ways, but generally to take the traffic away from where the residential accommodation is, resolve the bottlenecks that Councillor Crumpler just talked about, and also to try to convince people to where they can use alternative means of transport, ideally walking, cycling, but to have the provisions in place to allow that to happen safely and cleanly. So it's an enjoyable thing to do, and that's where again a lot of highways investment needs to go to give all the alternative modes of transport. Thankfully, electric vehicles are now becoming more popular. The electric vehicle charging network is growing, and certainly the commitment by government this week, the 2030 date, will help the industry to refocus its attention on production of good quality, hopefully affordable electric vehicles, which will all assist in improving air quality well beyond the 40 objective that we've got at the moment. So yeah, many more improvements to come.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Any more questions to Tim? Councillor Islam.
Thank you, Chair. Just to like to carry on from the just mention of Briley Hill improvement. It is true that Briley Hill 5 Ways was the main place where the congestion was a problem, and therefore the extremely high levels of nitrogen dioxide. And Venture Way bypass was built to alleviate that problem. But if we look at the traffic flow from Dudley Street junction of Venture Way, across Level Street, along the Venture Way, up till Mill Street and Church Street junction, what we find is that the traffic volume is increasing and there is congestion. And as this could be said to be a static flow, more static traffic there and increasing. So my question is, yes, we have tried to address the problem at 5 ways, but are we now not building up problem in an on-venture way? And therefore, isn't it prudent to start monitoring in areas where we have developed alleviation schemes and to see if earlier steps can be taken to address increasing nitrogen dioxide and pollutant levels? That's one question. And I'd like to ask one more question, and then that'd be easier for whoever wants to answer. And that is in relation to paragraph 9, where it's mentioned that a particular company was helped with some government grant to purchase some better vehicles or modify them. I like to know the process of the selection of one particular company. And point B is this, that my observation, I think observation of most of us would be that the number of taxis everywhere in the country and in our borough as well is increasing. And is there any study undertaken where this helps us to find out or keep a track of increasing levels of nitrogen dioxides, either as the whole of taxi fleet of the borough or in particular places in the borough? The research is very important. If I take you back to how we got into nitrogen dioxide and became aware of what was happening, it was found, this is just one aspect of the problem, that people who live near these areas of high pollution, they suffered in broad sense harmful health, or they were harmful to health and therefore ill effects of these things. But one particular issue was that the mothers who were carrying babies, who were pregnant, it's the babies, their development was to some extent affected, particularly brain development. So are we constantly, looking at pollutions and congested areas, and also trying to find if there are some public health measures in those areas where, like Halesowen Road, for example, in Netherton, where these levels are very high or appear to be high? Thank you.
Okay, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Islam. Yeah, that was a very comprehensive set of questions. First question about the improvements areas. We have this issue, or some of my highways colleagues tell me that as soon as we improve an area, if we give the network a bit more volume, then it's instantly filled because people realise that there's a quicker way to get somewhere. So they then use that way rather than another way, and the number of vehicles on the roads is continuing to increase. So it is an issue, and we realise that it's a never-ending task to try to improve traffic flow and congestion. And Neil Lissimore and Jeremy Butler, the two officers I deal with generally, who work for Gary Dean, spend most of their life, I think, trying to improve traffic flow and stop congestion, and that helps with air quality. Of those nitrogen dioxide tubes, the 54 I've got around the borough, we have got them literally all over the place. I haven't got the list to hand at the moment, but I'm sure that there are still some in Brierley Hill. I'm sure there are. So we try to keep some of the monitoring tubes in locations where improvements have occurred, just to monitor the effect of the improvement and just to keep an eye on how long lasting that improvement is. But yes, they do fill up the network again, unfortunately. And of course, once you've made some really significant changes, like those areas we've mentioned, the improvement areas, it's really difficult to do further changes then. It's much easier to do the first change. To improve it again even further can be quite difficult without the opportunity to do it. So yeah, we do keep an eye on those areas, but I have to say some of them do become issues again. The information in paragraph 9, the prospect coaches project. It was a project. It was a grant from DEFRA, from central government, a specific grant for this very purpose. We did speak to a few other operators in the borough just to see what they did, but there was quite a lot of match funding from the operator. So prospect coaches, I think it cost them £30,000 or £40,000 to also improve the emissions, or the way they operate, the pollution control additions to the coaches, the changes. So the other operators weren't prepared to make that investment at the time, and it was quite early on this. And we also wanted to specifically look at the coaches that were running around the borough, more our borough, around Dudley Borough, and some of the other operators that they used their coaches in different ways, and also outside the borough, whereas Prospect was almost continually the 10 we chose were the 10 they used within Dudley Borough specifically, and for the purpose that I mentioned. So lots of journeys within our borough. So they basically came up as the most appropriate company to offer the grant to, and thankfully they took it on board, and we had a good relationship. And it took about a year to get that project sorted. It took a long time to get the coaches converted, but as I say, we then monitored after and got a really good outcome from that. And most of those coaches are still operating. They would have been scrapped before now, had to be taken off the road and replaced possibly with other second-hand coaches, but they were operating as at a level as good as a new coach when they were converted. The final issue about taxis, we do work with our licensing department, who obviously license taxis, and it is a growing area. I mean, I'm sure we all note the number of additional taxis on the road these days, a lot more, very much more prevalent. The one initiative that we have got at Dudley is that we force all taxi operators to have their vehicles MOT'd by the local authority. So we have that facility down at the licensing depot in Dudley, and any taxi operator operating within licence to operate within Dudley has to have the vehicle MOT'd by Dudley Council. So we know absolutely for definite that they'd be MOT'd correctly, and that obviously includes the emissions as well, tailpipe emission checks. If we see a taxi, or if any of you or your constituents see a taxi but they're really concerned about the emissions from it, and that will probably be a visible emission, so a smoke emission, because nitrogen dioxide is invisible, so you won't know that, but a smoke emission which indicates the taxi is not operating well. If the taxi licensing people are contacted, they will pull that taxi in, normally the same day, without any warning, and insist it has an MOT check, an emissions test equivalent to the MOT check just for the emissions, immediately. And if it doesn't pass, then it's taken off the road immediately. So we've at least got that provision built in. But taxis are something we're looking at, because they are getting more prevalent, and we haven't got the data to say exactly which taxis and which areas are worse because of taxis. Our data isn't quite that specific, but certainly public health have got lots of statistics about the health of the nation and the borough in particular, and they have contributed to our work in Netherton specifically, to identify the effect that they feel, or certainly the health of the citizens of Netherton, which could be linked to air quality. So that is reported fairly frequently. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Islam, you've got your hand up.
Yes, number of points have arisen as a consequence of the response that Tim's given. And thank you for the response, Tim. Appreciate it's not an easy area to address given the variables. So the point number one would be, as Tim said, that wherever the council has tried to improve the flow of traffic and address the larger issue of air pollutants, the result has been that obviously more traffic is generated in those areas or comes into those areas. But he said that in some of those places, the monitoring actually takes place to see what is going on. In relation to Brierley Hill and other areas where this has happened, could we please have some sort of data that has been collected, and so that we can see what is the trends? And the reason for asking those trends is this, that as I mentioned in my earlier contribution, public health is affected to some or other degree around these areas. So one could ask public health department to work with central government to see what public health measures, advice, education, or awareness activities can be undertaken in those areas to prevent chronic conditions developing or getting worse in those citizens of those areas. The other point in relation to the response about taxis is, fair enough, that the monitoring, what Tim has mentioned is basically that there is strict monitoring through insisting that the MOT is done by a council facility, and also asking public to report any vehicle, taxi vehicle that is not fit, i.e. is giving fumes or smoke that could be detrimental to health. That's fine. I wasn't particularly concerned about that. I have every confidence that everybody who is given a duty, they are doing their duty well, although there are grumbles from time to time and there are issues from time to time within the taxi department. But my concern was, given the proliferation by necessity of the number of taxis in areas, particularly, and you mentioned Birmingham, for example, in central Birmingham, and in our case, we are a small area anyway. The number of taxis is increasing. Number of taxis is increasing. We all observe that. We all know that. But the fumes from them obviously contribute to environmental pollution and pollutants. My question is, are we working, have we tried to work with central government to insist that the standards of taxis is increased, but also given now the COVID situation and economic difficulties, which a lot of self-employed people are and will increasingly face, any help will be given to them. We need taxis and we need people to use them to go to work. And I think we're going to have post-COVID consequences with us for a long time. And I think if we agree that the number is increasing, the number of taxis is increasing, therefore we, I think, ought to be thinking of seeking support and help from the government for these self-employed taxi owners. Thank you.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Islam. Again, I couldn't disagree with anything that you said there. I can certainly have a look for the data for Brierley Hill and other areas of improvement, and we will just I'll pull something together after committee to distribute through Karen. with respect to the taxis, I'm afraid I'm not sure what help we're giving to the self-employed taxi drivers. But I know there are people at Dudley Council within economic regeneration who are responsible for assisting, particularly after COVID-19. And I'm sure we can find that detail out, see what assistance they provided specifically for taxi operators who are normally self-employed people. So yeah, I can make inquiries with respect to that, Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Gary.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. If I could just give some reassurance just with regards to emissions from taxis. Tim's obviously mentioned earlier that, as a local authority, we do MOT tests for the taxis out there. There are equally a number of conditions for those taxis with regards to the age of the taxi, in addition to a number of checks that those taxi drivers are required to undertake for their vehicles throughout the course of the year. Clearly, emissions is a key aspect there, not only on the age of the vehicle itself, but the miles that the vehicles undertake and the overall condition of the engine. That is monitored on a regular basis through both those vehicle checks and MOTs. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, great. Thanks for that report. Any other questions before we move on? I've got Councillor Islam's got his hand up again.
Hello.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I got cut off at some stage at the very beginning. What was the response in relation to how we are going to work with public health so that the awareness of long-term conditions arising from pollutants in high pollutant areas is addressed? How are we going to do that? Are we going to do something?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thank you for raising that again, Councillor Islam. Yes, environmental health and trading standards is part of the public health service at Dudley, so in a good place perhaps to promote that. Excuse me. We have, as you're aware, I'm sure, a new director of public health starting with us very shortly. So that can be an issue that I raise with the new director of public health when she first takes office, as a public health matter to be addressed. I know we've got significant data on health that we can relate to air pollution within the borough, so we're not short of data. So yes, Councillor, I can raise that with my public health colleagues to see what further work we can do. We've certainly done work with schools and colleges already, but we can look specifically at the areas where the air quality remains poor and focus on those areas. So I will take that to my public health colleagues on your behalf, Councillor Islam.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions before we move on? No more hands. Is the committee happy to support the recommendations? Yep, everyone happy? Yes. Okay, thanks very much, Tim, for that report. Moving on to number 7. Any questions from members to the chair with 2 clear days' notice? I haven't heard anything, Karen.
None, Chair, no.
None. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, here endeth the meeting. Thanks, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks very much.
Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Oh, yes.
Chair, can you just stay on the meeting?
Sure.
I just need to have a word with you.
Okay, great.